We start with a Fox News alert. We're awaiting the daily White House press briefing from Press Secretary Sean Spicer. That's set to start any minute now.
Yeah, it comes as the White House is putting pressure, major pressure, on Republican senators to pass a plan to replace Obamacare. We're covering all the news on Happening Now.
We have eliminated the Amir, and so the fight goes on.
The defense secretary confirming the leader of ISIS in Afghanistan was killed by U.S. and Afghan forces as General Mattis meets with our allies on the fight to defeat the terrorist army. Plus, former acting Attorney General Sally Yates set to testify in the Russia investigation amid growing concerns that Russia might still be an issue heading into the 2018 midterms. And a gruesome double murder. Two physicians engaged to be married are found dead in their penthouse apartment as police reveal disturbing details about the suspect. It's all happening now. But we begin with the battle over the Republican plan to replace Obamacare. The House moving the latest health care bill forward. Now it faces an uncertain future in the Senate. Welcome to the second hour of Happening Now. I'm John Scott.
And I'm Julie Banderas in for Jenna Lee today. So President Trump telling GOP lawmakers not to let the American people down on health care. But some senators want to scrap the House bill altogether and go back to square one.
Kristen Fisher live at the White House with more now. Kristen?
Hey, guys. Well, after successfully lobbying House Republicans to pass a health care bill, President Trump is now pressuring Senate Republicans to do the same. And he warned them over the weekend to not let the American public down. But the public and the president are going to need to be patient on this one. The Senate is expected to take much longer than the House did. In fact, Republican Senator Susan Collins said the Senate won't even take up the House bill, that they're going to start from scratch. Now, some more moderate House Republicans, like House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy, say that they're fine with that.
I have no problems if they write their own bill. If it took the House passing a bill to get them moving on a bill, I thank them for that. But whatever they do, they need to act because more people are losing their health care. Premiums are continuing to rise.
But House conservatives, the Freedom Caucus in particular, are going to be a much tougher sell. Another detractor, former President Barack Obama, who is now actively campaigning senators to save his signature health care law.
I hope that current members of Congress recall that it actually doesn't take a lot of courage to aid those who are already powerful, already comfortable, already influential. But it does require some courage to champion the vulnerable and the sick and the infirm.
Now, the other big news at the White House today, President Trump continuing to keep his campaign promise of appointing conservative judges to the nation's courts. After getting Judge Gorsuch to the high court, the administration is now turning its attention to the 120 openings on the lower court. 10 nominees are expected to be announced today, and that will likely happen during the briefing, which should be starting any minute now, though it has been known to run a minute or two late here and there. Julie, John.
We are waiting for that briefing to begin, and we'll take it live when it gets there. Kristen Fisher at the White House. Thank you.
Okay, now to Capitol Hill as the fight to repeal and replace Obamacare now shifts to the Senate, where Republicans have a much slimmer majority and lawmakers could start from scratch on the legislation. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is live on Capitol Hill to break it all down for us. Hey there, Mike.
Julie, good afternoon to you. With only 52 Republicans in the Senate, there's very little wiggle room. And so the work is underway to see if they can come up with a consensus Republican health care reform plan. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has a working group that's been meeting, trying to figure out what ideas must be included in a Senate GOP health care package. Top Republicans here on Capitol Hill say this is a rescue mission and they must get it right.
Look, these are our friends and our constituents. We want to make sure that people who have bad health care status, who have a pre-existing condition, get affordable coverage. And that's not happening in Obamacare. You got to remember, if you can't even get a health insurance plan, what good is it? You don't have health insurance.
The vote in the House last week on the American Health Care Act was very tight, 217 to 213. No Democrats supported that bill. Now the question is what role Democrats will play in the United States Senate. Some are suggesting they're open to improvements in health care, but don't like the notion of starting from scratch.
We have given 20 million people health care they never had, never bought, don't know the value. We never gave them one word of instructions how to use it. How to use it more effectively, how to use it more efficiently, how to keep themselves healthier, nutritional lifestyles, changing their whole lifestyles, making them more accountable and responsible. There's tremendous savings. We're not trying anything.
Democrats are focused on fixing Obamacare. Republicans are focused on scrapping Obamacare, with attention shifting to the Senate. It's not entirely clear they'll be able to work together. Julie?
All right. Mike Emanuel at the White House. Thank you so much. John?
Thank you. So the president's team is working now to sell the GOP health care bill to the Senate, with White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus urging lawmakers to do the right thing and get it done.
Look, the fact of the matter is there are some times in life you have to do what's right, not what's politically expedient. We believe this is going to be a better product, and by the time that people see that the premiums are lower, that it's a better service, there are more options and more choices, they're going to reward the Republicans that stood up and said, we're not going to see the Obamacare system, which is failing and collapsing, continue any longer. We're going to do something better, and we're going to do our job as legislators to get this thing done.
Joining us now is James Freeman, assistant editor of the Wall Street Journal's editorial page, also a Fox News contributor. So Reince Priebus, the president's chief of staff there, doesn't seem to think there's much risk in the Republicans revamping Obamacare. How do you see it?
Well, I think the much greater risk is if they fail, if they do nothing. And this phenomenon we've seen of insurance coverage, companies pulling out of the exchanges, parts of the country where there's no choice anymore, rising premiums, that all continues. So I think they've got a great opportunity here. The law failed on all of its basic promises, and they can do better.
Do you think that is widely, that's the widely held perception in the country, that the law has failed on its premises?
Well, I think certainly they didn't get as many people covered as they intended. Certainly when the promise was your premiums are going to go down by $2,500 and they've gone up double-digit increases. I don't see people satisfied. And I think this is where people misread some of these polls where they say, oh, look, Obamacare now is popular. Well, you still have in basically every poll huge majorities who either want to scrap it completely or want significant changes. And I think that is the part the Republicans can work on to create a system where the premiums are lower, you have more choice, and more people get options.
Most of the insured in the country are covered under their employer health care plans, right? And that's likely not going to change.
Right. And I think that was part of the problem with Obamacare. And that's why we've gotten into this debate about people with pre-existing conditions who will get covered. But you're talking about a very small percentage of the market. And you basically, what Obamacare tried to do is change the entire healthcare system, reallocate wealth within it instead of addressing that particular problem, which I think Republicans can do relatively inexpensively in terms of providing a place where people can get coverage, get care if they need it.
But why is there so much doom and gloom, both in the coverage and in the Democrat response to what the Republicans have done, at least on the House side?
Yeah, I think there was too much doom and gloom, maybe too much fear among moderates in the House. I don't think they realized that if President Trump's project fails and there's no improvement in insurance and the failures of Obamacare continue, this is a political disaster for them. And in swing districts, they get voted out next year. So I'm not sure why it took them so long to come around. I think for those moderates in the Senate, I think they should consider that failure is really not an option if they want to stick around.
Well, there was a time when President Trump was saying, listen, this thing is going to collapse. Let's just let it collapse and let the Democrats take the blame.
Yeah, I suppose that could be a strategy. But if you think about it, given that the Republicans have the White House, both houses of Congress, I don't think that's going to be an acceptable answer for voters next year as they go to the polls. I mean, yeah, Obama created this mess, but you had a chance to fix it and you didn't. I think you're going to pay the price.
From the Wall Street Journal, James Freeman. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Julie.
Well, the White House, John, giving the Pentagon the go-ahead to send more troops to Iraq and to Syria. What Defense Secretary James Mattis is saying about the next steps in the fight to defeat ISIS. Plus, North Korea detaining yet another American citizen over the weekend. That makes 4 total. How it could affect an already tense relationship between the U.S. and the rogue nation.
This is a regime that has been making belligerent statements for years and years and years, and it's one of the reasons that we have to take this threat seriously, because it is a destabilizing actor in the region.
I was having 5 or 6 panic attacks a day. I was also, at this point, struggling with an eating disorder. I was suffering, really suffering.
At just 16 years old, Madison Wiederhorn knew she needed professional help to address her mental health concerns. She checked herself into a teen treatment center called the Newport Academy, which has several campuses around the country. She underwent several different treatments, but it was music therapy that put her on the road to recovery.
Music therapy is an interpersonal process with a trained music therapist working with a client to work towards a better sense of well-being.
Music therapist Kristen McSorley says patients can both listen to and make music to help overcome their issues. Madison wrote music and played guitar during therapy sessions.
I would write with my friends, and they would tell me, and the therapist there, like, go deeper. What are you really trying to say? And that sounds good, but what's the root of this? Just like it was the situation with my anxiety. What is the root of the anxiety?
The benefit of music therapy over traditional talk therapy is making music has an end product, which Madison says is the closure she needed.
There have been times where I write a song, and I'm like, wow, that was great. This is closure. We're going to leave it at that.
Another advantage to listening to and making music is it creates a sense of community.
There are so many times where I'm having a tough day or I'm feeling pretty amped up, and I put on a song and you just connect. You don't feel as alone. You know that someone's gone through this, it's going to be okay, and you can listen to that, and that's a reminder of hope.
Now that her therapy is over, Madison continues the practices she learned and is an avid singer-songwriter.
Game over. 22 combat vessels.
As promised, the White House press briefing is underway on this Monday. Let's listen to Sean Spicer.
That we can do that a little more. I'll spend a little more time at the Pentagon. Move this up a little bit. I appreciate your flexibility today so that the pool has enough time to cover the Vice President and Secretary Shulkin as they welcome honor flight veterans to Washington on the anniversary of VE Day. The Vice President is hosting more than 120 veterans of World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War as part of National Military Appreciation Month and Public Service Recognition Week, highlighting the Trump administration's commitment to our military and public service. Also today, the Vice President, Secretary Price, Secretary Shulkin all attended an event on the scientific opportunities of biomedicine. Key leaders from government, the private sector, and academia discussed the United States' comprehensive biomedical landscape and further educated White House staff, including assistants to the President Ivanka Trump and Reed Cordish, on this important topic. The meeting was organized by the National Institutes of Health and was led by its director, Dr. Francis Collins. Leaders in the medical education and research joined executives from companies who invest in biotech to provide analysis and real-life examples of how America's sustained leadership in the biomedical industry has resulted in immeasurable benefits to both our country's economic and physical well-being. Among the participants were Bill Ford, the CEO of General Atlantic, Dr. Craig Thompson, the president of Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, Dr. Cornelia Bargman, the president of science at the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, Dr. Mark Tessay Levine, president of Stanford University, and Dr. Rick Lifton, the president of Rockefeller University. The United States currently sits atop the list of global investors in innovation in the life sciences, responsible for 44% of global research and development. This investment is dependent on the NIH and the important research it funds. In order to maintain our international leadership in biomedicine, we must strengthen the partnerships between government agencies, investors, academics, the biopharma industry, and research foundations. This meeting was an important step in reinforcing that essential cooperation. Moving on, I'm pleased to announce that today, shortly after this briefing, we will release a list of the President's third wave of federal court nominees. These 10 individuals that the President has chosen were chosen for their deep knowledge of the law and their commitment to upholding constitutional principles. 2 of the nominees today came from the list of potential Supreme Court nominees that the President released during the campaign. If confirmed, Justice Joan Larson will be a circuit court judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. Justice Larson is currently serving on the Michigan Supreme Court. And Justice David Straz will be a circuit court judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Eighth Circuit. He currently serves as a justice of the Minnesota Supreme Court. The campaign list was put together from input from the Heritage Foundation as well as the Federalist Society. And as the President said last September when it was released, these, quote, highly respected people are the kind of scholars that we need to preserve the very core of our country and make it greater than ever before, end quote. The President followed the principles that were used to guide that list to select the additional 8 individuals. And as I mentioned, the full list should be out very shortly. In terms of the President's schedule for today, this morning he met with his National Security Advisor, General McMaster. He also spoke with the French President-elect to congratulate him on his victory. A readout of that call should be out very shortly. The Prime Minister of Georgia was also at the White House meeting with the Vice President. The Prime Minister then dropped by with the Vice President into the Oval Office to greet the President. And earlier this afternoon, the President had lunch with the Vice President. In about an hour, he'll meet with Secretary of State Tillerson. Secretary Tillerson has also been meeting with several foreign leaders today at the State Department, including the Prime Minister of Montenegro, the Foreign Minister of Slovakia, and the Foreign Minister of Qatar. Secretary Mattis is also meeting with many foreign leaders during his European trip this week to reaffirm key United States military alliances. The Secretary is in Denmark to co-host a meeting with the Danish Minister of Defense with senior leaders from 15 countries that are key contributors to the de-ISIS military campaign. While in Copenhagen, Secretary Mattis will also meet separately with the Minister of Defense to discuss European security and the importance of the NATO alliance, and with the Danish Prime Minister to reaffirm the close ties between Denmark and the United States. In other cabinet news, Secretary Zinke is in Utah today, continuing his 4-day listening tour on the Bears Ears National Monument and Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument, putting into action President Trump's April 27th executive order to review these monuments. Secretary Zinke will be accompanied by the governor and member of Utah's congressional delegation and local stakeholders for a morning aerial tour of the million-plus-acre monument and an afternoon hiking tour and a roundtable meeting this evening with Friends of Cedar Mesa Museum. While in Utah, the Secretary and other officials are holding daily press briefings on the ground. You can reach out to the Interior Department for more details. And with that, I'd be glad to take a few questions. Kristen.
John, thank you. Former President Obama warned then President-elect Trump against hiring Mike Flynn as his national security advisor. Why did he ignore that warning?
Well, the President doesn't disclose details of meetings that he has, which in this case was an hour-long meeting, but it's true that President Obama made it known that he wasn't exactly a fan of General Flynn's, which is frankly shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, that given that General Flynn had worked for President Obama, was an outspoken critic of President Obama's shortcomings, specifically as it related to his lack of strategy confronting ISIS and other threats around that were facing America. So the question that you have to ask yourself really is, if President Obama was truly concerned about General Flynn, why didn't he suspend General Flynn's security clearance, which they had just reapproved months earlier? Additionally, why did the Obama administration let Flynn go to Russia for a paid speaking engagement and receive a fee? I mean, there were steps that they could have taken that, if that was truly a concern more than just a person that had bad blood.
And I want to follow up on a couple points because you raised the security clearance. But before that, if a sitting president raises the name of one individual, why wouldn't that give the president-elect pause? I understand what you're saying, the caveats about the fact that he campaigned against Hillary Clinton, etc. But wouldn't that give the incoming president pause?
Well, I think I would not know that I agree with your characterization. He made it clear that he wasn't a fan of his, and I don't think that should have come as a surprise, considering the role that General Flynn played in the campaign, criticizing his.
Didn't give him any pause at all.
No, I think if you know what we knew at the time, which is that the security clearance that he had been reapproved in April of that year, and they took, not only did they reapprove it, but then they took no steps to suspend it. So the question has to be, what did they do if they had real concerns beyond just not having, not liking him for some of the comments that he made?
And it's our understanding, and if you could clarify this, did Mike Flynn not need upgraded security clearance in order to serve as the National Security Advisor?
No, he'd been head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. That's the same.
You vetted him as well, correct?
That's the same clearance that the security clearance. We went over this a while ago. It's the same clearance at any level. Once you get it, you get it for the time that you had. He had his reinvestigation in April of 2016, and the Obama administration took no steps. Not only did they reaffirm that security clearance, they took no steps to suspend it or take any other action.
But did you not vet him yourselves?
Well, you don't vet on a security clearance. That's why you get a security clearance. Everyone in the government goes through the same process. So the answer is that that same process worked for General Flynn as it did for me or for anyone else who works here. There's no difference of a security clearance once it's issued. Zeke.
Thanks, Sean. You said a few minutes ago, Christian. What we know is what we knew at the time. So knowing what the White House knows now, does the White House, does the President believe that General Flynn should not have had that clearance reissued last year, number one? And number two, does the White House believe that General Flynn was truthful when he filled out his SF-86 for that reinvestigation last year?
Well, I'm not going to get into those details. It was obviously that was something that was adjudicated by the Obama administration in April of 2016. They took no steps to suspend that. So that's not really a question for us. It's a question for them at that time.
Well, but knowing what you know now, that's in the public
I think the President took appropriate action when he did, once he felt as though General Flynn had misled the Vice President, and he took appropriate and decisive action at the time, and he stands by that today.
Did his ties to Russia, did his work as a registered foreign agent, now registered foreign agent for the government of Turkey, lead to his firing in February?
Well, again, I don't think we're going to re-litigate this. The President made the right decision back then, and he stands by that. Hunter.
Thank you, Sean. Last week, officials indicated the Pentagon planned to send the President a proposal to send several thousand additional troops to Afghanistan. Can you confirm whether or not the President has made a decision about sending additional troops to Afghanistan? And if so, when are they going, how many are going, and what is their mission?
Yeah, I'll refer you to the Department of Defense on that. They are in contact with them, but we have nothing to share at this time. Sarah.
Thanks, John. The President tweeted this morning that senators on the Intelligence Committee should ask Sally Yates about her role in classified leaks about General Flynn. Does the President have evidence that ties Sally Yates to the Flynn leaks? Why did he tweet that?
Well, I think you guys are well aware of the President's concern about spills of classified and other sensitive information out into the open. It's something that should concern every American, and the President's made it very clear since he took office that's a big concern of his. And so the idea that classified information made its way into the press is something that I think, while we're asking all of these questions, is one of the ones that I think the senator should ask. How did that information get out into the open like that? I think that is an equally important question that, frankly, isn't getting asked.
But does the President believe that Sally Yates was the leaker in this?
Again, I think that the tweet speaks for itself. What he's saying is that the Senate should ask those questions. Yeah.
Sean, aside from the announcement today that the President will nominate 10 judges to fill federal vacancies, many conservatives remain concerned the White House is woefully behind on overall appointments. The President recently told the Examiner, paraphrasing, that he doesn't need to fill vacant posts in the administration. After these 10, there will still be 110 judicial vacancies. Does the President still believe vacant administration jobs do not need to be filled? And are there any plans to increase the pace of political appointments?
So there's like three questions in there. I'll try to break them down. Number one, we have a very robust schedule of releasing names. There is a method to this in terms of the nominees that are getting put out now, and I think you should expect to see more and more go through. The process this time around is a little bit different. We're actually going through the Office of Government Ethics and FBI clearances before announcing most of these individuals. And so there's a little bit of a difference in how we're doing this, but we are well on pace with respect to many of these to get the government up and running. But the President's point that he was making in that interview was that part of the review of government is to make sure that we're looking at these positions and figuring out whether or not we have the taxpayers getting the best bang for their buck, both in terms of productivity and cost. And so we're looking through the entire government. Director Mulvaney, I think, briefed you all a while ago about how we relook at government and figure out whether or not we can do a better job of filling positions, of staffing the government. But we're going to continue to have announcements on key positions as the week goes by.
You see control to the bureaucracy if you don't fill some of these.
We are, and that's what I'm saying. I think that you're going to continue to see, whether it's judicial nominations, ambassadors, other key positions. I think we have a very healthy clip of announcements that continue to go out. Trey.
Thanks, Sean. Ahead of her testimony today, does President Trump believe Sally Yates is a trustworthy source of information?
Well, that's not up for us to decide. I mean, that is up to the Senate to decide whether or not what she does, and we'll have to wait and see what that.
And following up on Sarah's question, it seemed that the president was implying that Sally Yates may have had something to do with the leaked information to newspapers. Is that what he was implying?
Well, I think the tweet speaks for itself. I don't think sometimes you don't have to read too much into it. Richard.
Thank you, Sean. Two questions on NAFTA. First, the Canadian Prime Minister on Friday said that they're considering, as a reaction to what the Prime Minister calls an unfair punitive duty on Canadian softwood lumber, considering banning coal imports from the U.S. Is it the beginning of a trade war between Canada and the U.S.?
No. That's why we have dispute settlement mechanisms to do this in a responsible way. Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary, has been in touch with his counterparts over there, and I think, look, there's a reason that the dispute mechanism is set up the way that it is under this particular trade agreement, but under most trade agreements, so that the two parties can resolve them in a way that allows for both sides to air their concerns. But that's why you have an agreement, and that's why you have a mechanism set up to do that.
So you trust the mechanism on this?
No. Let's let it play out. But I think Secretary Ross took appropriate action to protect a U.S. industry, and we're going to let the process play out.
And 10 days ago, the president said that Mexico and Canada had agreed to fasten the process to renegotiate NAFTA. What has happened in the last 10 days?
Well, I think our officials will start to. We'll have further updates for you on that. Right now, there's nothing to share. John.
Thanks a lot, Sean. Did Sally Yates have to run any of her planned testimony by the General Counsel's office that she'll deliver later this afternoon?
I'm not aware of it, no.
And also, do you have any reason to doubt that her testimony, which will be under oath, will be truthful before the Senate subcommittee?
I have no. I mean, no. I would assume that when you raise your right hand and agree to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, that you'll do that. That's the whole reason that you pledge. Francesca.
Thank you, Sean. For weeks during the transition, President Trump was not receiving a daily intelligence briefing. He was receiving his information from General Flynn. Do you think that lack of direct information from the intelligence community contributed to the lapse in vetting with General Flynn?
So first, he did get his. I mean, we extensively went over the PBD briefing throughout the campaign. I believe back then it was 3 times a week that he was getting it, and then supplanted by his national security team that would go in and do that. So I think the premise is not there. Secondly, as I mentioned to Kristen, the processes that were followed by General Flynn are followed by every government employee who receives a clearance at that particular level.
Sorry. On another thing, I wanted to talk about the signing statement that came out on Friday with the spending bill. Senior administration officials, including Education Secretary Betsy DeVos, didn't seem to know about that. Why didn't she or people working on that issue know about that, know it was coming? Whose idea was that? And what happened between when Sarah was out here on Friday saying that she didn't think there was going to be something like that, and then close of business when there was a signing statement? And did you know it was coming?
So signing statements are a pro forma activity that occurs during a bill signing that's performed by the Department of Justice, Office of the Legislative Counsel. It's been used by every president. So I'm not really sure what everyone knew, but that is something that goes along going back multiple administrations.
Can I follow with that on HBCUs from that signing statement,
Cecilia.
please?
Thanks, Sean. On the travel ban, a couple questions, if I may. Back in February, the president said that lifting the travel ban would mean that many bad and dangerous people would be pouring in. Have you seen any evidence that that's been the case in the 3 months since this ban was lifted?
I think that's a question for the Department of Homeland Security.
Well, that's something you've been tracking.
No, I personally know, but I'd be glad to follow up with the Department of Homeland Security. I don't have anything at this time on that.
Okay, in the same vein, if if this White House is no longer calling this a Muslim ban, as the president did initially, why does the president's website still explicitly call for, quote, preventing Muslim immigration? And it says Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
I'm not aware of what's on the campaign website. You'd have to ask them. I know how we've talked about this from the first day of this administration as a travel ban that's in this country's national security interest, to make sure that people who are coming in here with the right motives and reasons, that we're having a public safety aspect to making sure that we're protecting our people. I think that's we've been very consistent since the first day of this administration on this.
Is it worth standing here, though, and completely disavowing the use of that phrase Muslim ban? I mean, if it's still on the website, if the president's words are being used against him in court today, is it worth you clarifying that?
I'm trying to figure out why I've been very clear. I don't think I need to clarify what we have said or what the president said.
Since it's coming up in court, and if that's
I understand that, and that's frankly one of the reasons that we have concerns about how that's being interpreted, because I think the intent of the travel ban was very clear. I think it was something that the president made very clear in the filings that we have filed, why he did it, the motives for doing it, and he was very clear when he spoke about it from the beginning. So there really shouldn't be any question as to why the president's doing this, and the idea of making sure that we're putting the safety of our country and our people first and foremost. So, Tamara.
Thank you. I've got two topics, hopefully fast.
Okay.
So the Kushner family was in China making a pitch for the EB-5 visa program. This came a day after the president signed the omnibus, which of course extended that program without any changes. So two questions on that. One, is it a violation of the conflict of interest agreement that Jared Kushner came to? And also, does the president believe that that investor visa program needs to be modified in any way?
So I think I would refer you to the company on that. But Jared has done everything to comply with the ethics rules to make sure, and that had nothing to do with him per se. He wasn't involved. And secondly, I think we've talked about this before, that the president and Congress are looking at how to look over the entire visa program, all the various visa programs, and whether or not they are serving the purpose that they were intended to, whether or not we're making sure that we do what's in the best interest of the American worker. And so we're going to continue to work with Congress on that.
Okay, and regarding the Opioid Commission, it's my understanding that no members of that commission have been named yet. We're more than 30 days into what was supposed to be a 90-day period for that commission to come back with a report to the president. What's up with that, and does that send the wrong signal to people who believe that this is a very urgent crisis where like more than 100 people are dying every day?
Right. Well, let me get back to you on the exact names and the announcement on that. I'll follow up with that. I think when it comes to the opioid crisis, the president, both during the campaign, the transition, and now as president, has made it very clear of his commitment to figuring out how we can address this crisis that plagues so many neighborhoods and communities, and he'll continue to work with, he appointed Governor Christie in a bipartisan commission. So as soon as we have additional information on that, we will do that.
Kevin. Why is it important for the president to get these 10 individuals out there to serve the country? And on a more broader perspective of this question, there are a number of vacancies, 129 going into the day, to say nothing of some of the openings over there in the EOB that I'm sure can still be filled. The pace seems slow. Is the president aware of that pace? Is he comfortable with the pace? And what's the White House doing, not just to fill those important judicial jobs, but others that are related to the administration?
So on the judicial jobs, obviously, we're going through it in a very methodical way. As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of background that goes on in each of these in terms of the Office of Government Ethics, the FBI background check that goes on. And so they're all in the pipeline. I think you'll continue to see a very robust amount of announcements on not just the judicial front, but on several of the fronts. And we've been tracking where we are. I think we're well on pace with where previous administrations have been. Some ahead, some a little behind. But we're doing a great job of filling those key positions and making sure that we get the right person for the right job.
Steve. I want to ask you a big picture question about Afghanistan. You were asked about troop levels, and you don't have an answer to that. But last week, the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan and Reconstruction painted a very grim picture. Security incidents through March reached the highest level in a decade. Civilian casualties were the highest on record. There's rampant drug use in Afghanistan. So as the president weighs this request for more troops, what's going to be his ultimate goal? Is it going to be stability? Is it outright victory? in the 16th, 17th year of this war?
Well, I think number one, he wants to make sure that we defeat ISIS. That is something that is in our national security interest. Make sure that we protect our people, but does so in a very responsible, smart way. I mean, he's talked about not projecting, where he's going and what he's going to do to let the enemy know ahead of time. And part of that guidance and that his national security team is giving him are different pieces that you're talking about. How do we achieve those key outcomes? How do we do what's in the country's best interest and utilize our military and our treasure to the best of our ability? That is something that we're continuing to work on and do, and that's part of what he is getting briefed on and is implementing. So I'm not entirely sure if that answers where you're going, but that is what he has been getting briefed on, and that is the kind of decision-making process that is currently underway.
Is the president displeased with the current state of affairs in Afghanistan?
Well, I think he wants to make sure that we do what we can to win, and that's why he charged the generals and other military advisors and national security team to come up with a plan that can get us there. So, Ronica?
Sean, thank you. Does the president believe that health care is a right or a product?
Well, I think the president's been very clear in his statements that whether or not you call it a right or not, he wants every person to have access to health care that covers pre-existing conditions, that is affordable. And I think the steps that he's taken over the last week in the bill that he's implemented, that he worked to pass through the House, clearly highlight those priorities. He wants to make sure that people have access to care. He is concerned when he hears about companies leaving the marketplace and not giving consumers a choice. He is concerned when he hears about deductibles going through the roof, costs going through the roof, and people not having the access that they can to health care. And he is very concerned that we are facing a choice right now where Obamacare is failing and dying, and that if we don't act, that people won't have access to health care and they won't be able to afford it. And so the steps that he is taking are to achieve those principles that he's laid out. Blake.
Two questions as it relates to President Trump and former President Obama. Back to that November conversation, were there specific reasons given, and if so, as it relates to Michael Flynn, and if so, was that based on private information?
I don't know the answer to that. I know that, like I said, he passed along exactly what I mentioned to Kristen at the outset, and that's all I got.
Sean, secondly.
Michael.
Two clarifications. On the signing statements broadly, not just the subject of the HBCUs, are you saying that the president was not aware of that of the details of that very long signing statement? It was just something done at OLC? And
No, that's not. I'm sorry. No, the president's obviously aware of what happened. The question that was asked is, it is a process. It has happened for administrations going back, generations. I'm sure. I don't have this precise nature of when signing statements came into being, but this is a normal pro forma piece that goes along with a bill signing to make sure that the executive branch's intent is as understood.
But a lot of the things that were in that signing statement were things that were essentially carryovers from things that Obama had also objected to. But the president and the senior staff here was aware of what those things were and approved those.
Of course,
things.
yes.
Okay. Second question on the Flynn and the security clearances. You guys have made, both from the podium here and also the president made a big deal of this question of the Obama people gave him the clearance or re-upped the clearance earlier. Are you suggesting now, knowing what you guys know with hindsight and whatever, are you saying that they should have, you believe that the Obama administration should have denied him his clearance back in April based on the information that you're now aware of, connections with Russia, et cetera, et cetera? Are you suggesting that they should have denied it?
No, what I'm suggesting is that you can't have it both ways. The folks who are coming out and saying Obama, expressed some concern about Flynn. Well, number one, it was pretty expected. This is a guy who was very outspoken in his criticism of President Obama's policies. So the idea that President Obama, didn't like the guy doesn't seem shocking. But the point that you have to ask yourself is, if the Obama administration, or under the Obama administration, if they reissued one of the highest security clearances that you can get, knowing what they knew then, and then didn't do anything to take a proactive steps to suspend it in any way, shape, or form. The question you have to ask yourself is, if they were concerned, why didn't they take any steps? They're the ones who had, at that point, all the access and all the knowledge to everything that was on his SF-86 security clearance, not us. So if President Obama or anyone else, frankly, in the government was concerned, the question should be asked, what did they do? And if nothing, then why not, if they really truly were concerned? I think that is a fair question. Dave.
Over the weekend, North Korea detained a fourth U.S. citizen. Are you concerned that they're trying to escalate tensions even further? Do you consider these Americans hostages? And what are you doing diplomatically, back channel or otherwise, to try and get them released?
Yeah, obviously this is concerning. We're well aware of it. And we're going to work through the Embassy of Sweden that has a facility in North Korea, or an embassy in North Korea, through our State Department to seek the release of the individuals there. But I would refer you to the State Department on that.
Sean, thanks very much. Just to follow up on your answer on Afghanistan, you mentioned ISIS, but you didn't mention the Taliban. Should we read that to mean that the focus will be on ISIS?
No, it's to defeat both the ISIS and Taliban. It's to make sure that we put our national security interests first and defeat all of those folks that seek to do us harm.
Are you willing to negotiate with the Taliban?
I think right now the whole point of this is the president is receiving a plan and guidance from his national security team as he had asked for. That guidance is coming forward as we speak. He's continuing to meet with them, and there will be further updates from the Department of Defense as we move forward. As I mentioned at the outset, the president or the vice president has an event. I want to make sure the pool has time to set for it. We're around all afternoon. I will take care. Good to see you. Thank you.
President Obama, was he right about Michael Flynn? A lot of questions, obviously, about former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. Also there touching on the Korean situation. Korea has arrested a fourth American in that country and charged that person with crimes against the state. Sean Spicer, the president's chief spokesman there, holding the daily briefing at the White House, about half an hour's worth, a little shorter than normal. Julie?
All right, John. Well, former acting Attorney General Sally Yates and the former Director of National Security and National Intelligence, James Clapper, are testifying today before a Senate subcommittee as they investigate Russian interference with the 2016 presidential election. Now, there is a report suggesting this investigation could last well into 2018 and cause problems for Republicans in the midterm elections.
If the acting attorney general insists on seeing the White House counsel, that's a tectonic thing in its own right. So it suggests a couple of things. One is the chaos in the Trump White House. Second is the inordinate distrust of the officials from the government they were replacing. And third, it's going to feed that darker narrative out there with regard to the relationship between the Trump campaign and the Russian Federation.
Joining us now, radio talk show host Ethan Berman and David Webb, Fox News contributor and host of the David Webb Show over on Sirius Radio XM. Thank you so much for talking to us. David, first let me just ask you, because on the eve of Sally Yates' testimony before the Senate on her warnings about Mike Flynn, Trump still maintains he defends his former national security advisor. And I want to put up some tweets that he actually put out there today. He says, ask Sally Yates under oath if she knows how classified information got into the newspaper soon after she explained it to the White House counsel. And also tweeting, General Flynn was given the highest security clearance by the Obama administration, but the fake news seldom likes talking about that. So, David, when Flynn went to Russia in 2015 to deliver a paid speech and take a photo with Putin, he was acting under an Obama security clearance. That is a point maybe we don't hear about so much the president wants to stress. Why isn't the media reporting this?
Because they don't want to. What General Hayden said, the former NSA director, kind of points to that. And this is what the Democrats set up in a narrative over the weekend. And they went out to the Sunday talk shows. It's dark. It's the deception. They're trying to sell all the darker sides of this. Well, I can tell you for one thing, their stories of palace intrigue are not what they say. I was in the West Wing just this past Friday. I've spent a lot of time in D.C. talking to top officials. So the palace intrigue is separate. The real question here is the realities of the Obama administration and General Flynn. Sean Spicer just said it in the briefing. If they had concerns about General Flynn, why did they reauthorize his clearance in April?
There. David and Ethan, we are going to take a quick commercial break, and then we're going to be right back. Stick with us. Welcome back. I want to welcome back Ethan Berman and David Webb, and we're talking about Sandy Yates, this whole investigation and questions regarding Mike Flynn. And first of all, can we just point out the fact that under the Obama administration, when Flynn, in fact, had gone to Russia, and he's seen in that photograph with Vladimir Putin, it was, in fact, under President Obama's security clearance that he was on that trip. Now, Obama, there's now word that within 48 hours of President Trump being inaugurated before taking office, that he warned him of Flynn. If he was so concerned, Ethan, about Flynn, then why didn't he pull his security clearance?
Well, I think that is an interesting question, and maybe we should go back and see who did the FS-86 processing back in April 2016 and make sure that processes and procedures were followed. But this whole thing is really a misdirection, because you have a question here about General Flynn and why we have a president of the United States who continues to defend somebody who is now accused and allegedly violated U.S. code related to taking money from a foreign government. How can you defend that? This is a shame. I mean, Republicans, my friends, who normally are concerned about things like Russian intrigue in the United States, suddenly are wanting to point back a year from now instead of looking at today, saying, what are we doing to stop these interferences in the United States and our people violating the law overseas?
Okay, but President Trump never actually lied about Flynn's meetings. In fact, he didn't try to cover up anything here. David, he actually came out and acknowledged publicly that he didn't believe it was appropriate for Flynn to have not have informed the vice president of his meeting, and in fact said that he did not remember the phone call, that they had discussed sanctions, that again was inappropriate. So he didn't necessarily defend his actions, but he does defend him as a man. He says he's a good man, and he was quite qualified for this position. And when we hear that President Obama warned him that Flynn was bad news when he himself worked for the Obama administration and had free range to access these ambassadors in Russia, it just doesn't sort of add up.
No, it doesn't. But by the way, might I also mention that in America, you're innocent until proven guilty. So allegations are just that. When there is something proven, then President Trump may make a different statement if it was to the contrary. So he's allowed to defend his choice for his cabinet. That's how it works here. The fact is that the Obama administration, with the reauthorization of the security clearance, is either incompetent or they didn't have concern. Either they screwed up or they didn't have a concern. The Obama administration and their officials have also tried to sow discontent with the palace intrigue stories, the support of the media, and going out after the Trump administration. So I'm not surprised there. When it comes to Sally Yates and General Hayden, I want to see actual proof, not allegations, even of this, quote, warning to White House counsel, because so far we see a lot of smoke, no fire.
All right, so there needs to be proof. Is there going to be proof, Ethan?
I'm not sure yet, and as David Webb knows, as a Marine who's been through the training related to intelligence, he would also know that you can't share certain pieces of information publicly. And I would also suggest that when you have people like General Hayden making statements like he has with the knowledge that he has of the inside, there is a whole lot of smoke here. And when we're talking about our Cold War adversary who has been waging an electronic war on us for at least the last 10 years, as somebody who's worked in information security like I have, they've been doing this, and to deny that and to misdirect is a problem.
Well, first that's all the time we have. I'm sorry, we got a lot going on with the press conference earlier. Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back.
Thank you, Julie.
Emmanuel Macron winning a decisive victory last night. Now he faces the task of uniting a divided country. Some voters saying they picked Macron only because they oppose Marine Le Pen. James Kirchick, a fellow with the Foreign Policy Initiative and author of the book, The End of Europe, Dictators, Demagogues, and the Coming Dark Age, joins me now. All right, so why don't you explain it for us? What does Emmanuel Macron's win mean to the United States?
Well, it's certainly a victory for a more pro-European, open, progressive agenda. At the same time, I wouldn't read too much into it, because a lot of the people who voted for Emmanuel Macron were doing so because they didn't want Marine Le Pen. It was more of an anti-vote than a pro-vote. And if you look at the first round results, when you add up Marine Le Pen's support, and when you also add up the support that the far-left candidate got in the first round, you have almost 50% of French basically voting for anti-reform candidates. So it's going to be a very difficult 5 years for him to really reform the economy in France, which needs reform.
Right, it does. Now, let me just talk about this candidate in particular, because he was considered their liberal candidate, if you will. Yeah. But from a defense and economic perspective, the U.S. can still rely on its European Union ally, since Macron supports staying in the EU. But does NATO and the common defense structure of the West also benefit from the Macron victory?
Absolutely. I mean, Marine Le Pen was opposed to NATO. She wanted to take France out of NATO. She was also very close to the Russians, to Vladimir Putin. She visited him in Moscow several weeks ago, and her party, the National Front, got a €9 million loan from a Russian bank. She's also quite anti-American. This wasn't really reported that much in the United States, but she comes from this sort of long, far-right tradition of anti-Americanism. So yes, I think this is good for the U.S. interest.
All right. Well, that is good news. We like to hear that. James Kirchick, that's all the time we have.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. Stay with us.